Hello, this is Bradon Hopper, and today I'll be going over the ideas of totalitarianism, authoritarianism, megalomania, and hegemony, hopefully giving in-depth definition and examples of where they've been used before. First off, defining totalitarianism. It's a system of government that is centralized and led by a dictator, requiring the absolute obedience of the population living within it. Being led by this single entity, enforcing his will upon those to oftentimes better his own position. Next, authoritarianism. There's a way of governing that values order above all else, sacrificing many personal freedoms to keep this control. It is oftentimes also led by a dictator. Be careful with the understanding of totalitarianism and authoritarianism, as there's oftentimes overlap in understanding between them, but they are ultimately different ideas and political theories. So be wary of that, but we'll be taking more looks at this later. Next, moving on to megalomania, is a described as a mental disorder in which the affected person, excuse me, has an obsession with power and control, believing they are much more important than they actually are. This is common in more extremely powerful positions such as dictatorships and leaders of a regime. Next, hegemony. It describes a political or cultural divide in dominance or authority or power over people of a different social standing. This is often seen in monetary inequalities of some countries, where the richer you are, the more power you have politically in the country. This creates a great schism within the population, where the rich hold most, if not all, the power, and the poor have little to nothing at all. Going back to totalitarianism, well-known examples of this is Joseph Stalin and Kim Jong-un. You can see that they were totalitarian regimes as these dictators held the power in their country completely, using it to force their nation to serve them fully, ruling with an iron fist and doing what they needed to keep the power, often killing millions. Next, authoritarianism. Again, we look back at the point that these two ideas have overlap but should not be confused, such as the example of Hitler's Nazi Germany, where this was very authoritarian. He used his power to enforce rules and laws to hold the people to as close of a rule set as he possibly could. But it is also totalitarian as he was a dictator leading this country, a single entity with power. The totalitarian examples I gave earlier often can fall under authoritarianism too, so keep that in mind. But there are still examples where there is authoritarianism, but there is not totalitarianism. And these are sometimes found in smaller regions of the Middle East where there is a royal family leading the relatively small population there. It is a social con it's a social standing where the royals, the family, the household, and their advisors, that political standing holds the power. It is not a single entity or point in which holds power, but it is still heavily regulated with many laws and with much power, giving it the ideas of the authoritarianism. Moving on to megalomania. I mentioned earlier it was a common trait in dictators and leaders of totalitarian regimes. An example of this would be the current leader of China, Xi Jinping. This trait often makes these leaders and the example that I have given aggressive, and when an undesirable event happens, such as Hong Kong and China in these last few years, they become very aggressive with it, using whatever power needed to regain control or ensure their reign over them. Another thing is criticizing these people, as they have much higher sense of self-entitlement, self-importance, self-power. They often feel untouchable and aggressive when people try to point out that they are not perfect. This can lead to heavy fines, prison time, and even worse when you are talking about people with megalomania. Finally, hegemony. It can be found in much less extreme levels than government, as I mentioned earlier. It can be found from schools to governments in many aspects of life dealing with social ideas, as humans naturally have a disposition to put up a social order. The problems with hegemony do arise, though, when extreme forms of begin appearing and affecting the power order, such as within government. Examples of this can be found ranging in cultural divisions within the United States, such as many people know, the 1%. Uh, it is a common thing to ostracize the 1% within the common people. They feel like they are so far away and they feel like they have all the power to many people. Uh, Another example of this ranges all the way to the political divisions of Hitler's Nazi Germany, where his military was the massive political power, and everything else, if you were not in the military, you had no power at all. That sets up a social standing, which this individual part of it holds all the power over all remaining parts of the social constructs. Now, how do these ideas relate to each other? Such as totalita- totalitarian governments can also be authoritarian. Adolf Hitler, Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, all these are well known totalitarian regimes. And while they are also authoritarian, it does not mean all authoritarian governments are totalitarian. As I mentioned earlier with the royal families within the Middle East, they are not totalitarian. They rule heavily and strictly, but they are more a social standing at the top ruling other than the entity with the supreme power. Next, how does megalomania affect totalitarianism and authoritarianism? Well, it's rampant in both of them and is oftentimes a driving factor in both of these ideas. It is the yearning for power, the wanting of it that pushes these people to establish these specific orders, to try to better their own positions, to try to gain the power that they want so badly with this mental disorder, leading to the beliefs that they should hold the power or their group should hold the power, leading to totalitarianism and authoritarianism. Finally, uh, hegemony. Where does hegemony play in the role of authoritarianism and totalitarianism? Well, it is many times quite obvious where you can find the political divisions, what, what societal divisions within the political spectrum of authoritarianism and totalitarianism. Many times authoritarianism is greater as there's literally a social ruling class above all others who hold the power. there's a great schism there. Totalitarianism is much more a hierarchy where there is the single regime leader above it, and it goes down into his advisors, and then the ruling class, and so on and so forth, going down the pyramid, per se. Both these political theories have clear divisions within the population, which sets up the ideas of hegemony within both of them. Thank you for listening to my uh, PowerPoint today, my explanation of how totalitarianism, authoritarianism, megalomania, and hegemony, what they are, how they relate to each other, and the examples that I've given to hopefully better the ideas and explanations of them.